Bullies humiliated the 300-pound overweight girl. Big mistake. She was strong. Sarah Rodriguez had learned long ago that being invisible was safer than being seen. At 17, she carried her weight like armor, hunched shoulders and downcast eyes, becoming her shield against a world that seemed determined to remind her she didn't belong. When her family moved to Riverside High in the middle of junior year, she hoped for a fresh start, but the whispers followed her through the hallways like shadows. "Look at that whale," she heard someone mutter as she navigated the crowded corridor on her first day. The words stung, but Sarah kept walking, her backpack clutched tightly against her chest. She'd heard worse, much worse. What none of them knew was that beneath the loose-fitting clothes and shy demeanor lived someone entirely different. For the past 6 years, Sarah had been training at Martinez boxing gym in her old neighborhood, where her uncle Miguel had taught her that strength came from within. She'd won 3 amateur championships in the heavyweight division, her fists carrying power that could drop opponents twice her size. But here, in these sterile hallways filled with judgment, she was just another target. The cafeteria became her first battlefield. Sarah sat alone, picking at her sandwich while conversations buzzed around her like static. That's when she noticed them watching her, 3 girls at the popular table, their eyes fixed on her with predatory interest. The leader was Ashley Morrison, a tall blonde with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Her followers, Jessica Walsh and Madison Pierce, flanked her like loyal servants, their perfectly styled hair and designer clothes marking them as untouchable. "God, she's taking up 2 seats," Ashley said loudly enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Maybe she should buy 2 lunches while she's at it." Laughter rippled through their section, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never resurface. Instead, she finished her sandwich in silence, gathering her things while the whispers grew louder. "Seriously, who let the circus elephant in here?" Jessica's voice carried across the room. Sarah's hands trembled as she stood, but she didn't turn around. She couldn't, because if she turned around, if she let them see the fire building in her chest, everything would change. Uncle Miguel's voice echoed in her mind. "A real fighter knows when to fight and when to walk away, Mija. Save your strength for when it matters." But each day made it harder to walk away. Ashley and her crew seemed to have appointed themselves as Sarah's personal tormentors, turning her simple act of existing into a daily gauntlet. They'd bump into her in the hallways, knocking books from her hands while offering mock apologies. They'd make loud comments about her size whenever she passed, their voices dripping with false concern. "Someone should really tell her about portion control," Madison would say, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Maybe she doesn't know there are other sections in the cafeteria besides the dessert line," Ashley would add, her friends dissolving into giggles. The gym became their favorite hunting ground. During PE class, when Mrs. Patterson wasn't looking, they'd make sure Sarah knew exactly where she stood in their hierarchy. When teams were chosen for volleyball, she was always picked last, met with exaggerated sighs and eye rolls. When they ran laps, Ashley would jog beside her, offering running commentary. "Come on, Sarah, you can do it. Just pretend there's a donut at the finish line." The other students watched with the detached interest of an audience at a show. Some looked uncomfortable, but nobody spoke up. Nobody intervened. They were all too grateful it wasn't them in Ashley's crosshairs. Sarah absorbed it all in silence, her jaw clenched and fists buried deep in her pockets. At night, she'd lie awake replaying every humiliation, every cruel word, every moment when she'd chosen to walk away instead of fight back. The reasons for her restraint were simple but powerful. She was new, she was outnumbered, and she was tired of being the problem everywhere she went. Fighting back would only confirm what they already thought about her, that she was different, dangerous, someone to be feared rather than accepted. But more than that, she was terrified of what she might do if she let herself go. In the ring, controlled aggression was an art form. In the hallways of Riverside High, it would be devastation. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in late October. Sarah had been at Riverside for 6 weeks, and the bullying had settled into a predictable rhythm. She'd learned to navigate around Ashley's group, to take alternate routes between classes, to eat lunch in the library instead of the cafeteria. She thought she'd found a way to survive. She was wrong. That morning she'd worn her favorite shirt, a soft blue sweater her grandmother had given her for her birthday. It was one of the few pieces of clothing that made her feel pretty, that reminded her she was more than just her size. She'd even let her dark hair fall loose around her shoulders instead of pulling it back in its usual ponytail. Ashley noticed immediately. "Well, well, well," she said, blocking Sarah's path to first period. "Look who's all dressed up today. You got a date, Sarah? Is there actually someone desperate enough to—" "Just leave me alone," Sarah interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What was that?" Ashley cupped her ear dramatically. "I couldn't hear you over the sound of your stomach growling." Jessica and Madison flanked her, creating a wall of mockery. Other students began to slow down, sensing drama. Sarah felt the familiar burn of humiliation creeping up her neck, but something else was building too. Something darker. "I said leave me alone," she repeated louder this time. Ashley's eyes lit up with cruel delight. "Oh, she's got an attitude now. Girls, I think our little whale is trying to be tough." "Maybe she thinks she's scary," Madison added with a laugh. "The only thing scary here is her outfit," Jessica chimed in. "Did she steal that from a circus tent?" The hallway erupted in laughter. Sarah stood frozen in the center of it all, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. She could feel every eye on her, could hear every whisper and snicker. This was it. This was the moment she'd been dreading and anticipating for weeks. "You know what?" Ashley stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than her shouting. "I'm tired of pretending to be nice. You disgust me. Every time I look at you, I want to throw up. You're a walking disaster, and everyone here knows it." The words hit like physical blows, each one precisely aimed to cause maximum damage. Sarah felt something crack inside her chest, a wall she'd built to protect herself from exactly this moment. The carefully constructed barriers between her two worlds, the fighter and the victim, began to crumble. "Nothing to say," Ashley pressed. "What's wrong? Can't think past your next meal?" That's when Sarah's posture began to change. It was subtle at first, a slight straightening of her shoulders, a shift in her stance that put her weight more evenly distributed. Her hands, which had been clutching her backpack straps, slowly relaxed to her sides. She lifted her chin, and for the first time in 6 weeks, she looked Ashley Morrison directly in the eye. "You done?" Sarah asked, her voice steady and calm in a way that made Ashley take an involuntary step back. "What did you just say to me?" "I asked if you were done." Sarah's voice carried a new quality, something that made the laughter in the hallway begin to die down. "Because I've been listening to your mouth for 6 weeks now, and I'm starting to think you might be the one with the problem." Ashley's face flushed red. "You fat bitch, how dare you?" "There it is," Sarah interrupted, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Your true colors. You know, Ashley, you talk a lot about how I look, but at least I don't have to tear other people down to feel good about myself." The hallway had gone completely quiet now. Students pressed closer, phones appearing as they sensed something significant was about to happen. Ashley looked around wildly, suddenly aware that the script had changed and she was no longer in control. "You think you're tough now?" Ashley's voice cracked slightly. "You think because you finally grew a backbone, you can talk to me like that?" "I think," Sarah said, taking a step forward, "that you're about to find out exactly how tough I am." The shift was dramatic and immediate. Where moments before stood a hunched, apologetic girl, now stood someone entirely different. Sarah's shoulders squared, her feet planted in a stance that spoke of years of training. Her eyes, which had spent weeks avoiding contact, now locked onto Ashley with laser focus. You want to keep talking? Sarah asked, her voice carrying through the hallway like a challenge. Or are you ready to back up all that mouth? Ashley looked to her friends for support, but Jessica and Madison had gone pale, sensing something dangerous in the air. The other students formed a loose circle, their phones recording everything. I don't fight pigs, Ashley said, but her voice wavered. No, Sarah agreed. You just torture them until they can't take it anymore. But here's the thing, Ashley. I'm not a pig. I'm not your victim. And I'm definitely not afraid of you. Ashley made her mistake then. Whether it was pride, panic, or pure stupidity, she lunged forward with her hand raised, aiming for Sarah's face. It was a wild, untrained swing that telegraphed itself from miles away. Sarah moved like liquid mercury. She sidestepped the clumsy attack, caught Ashley's wrist, and used the blonde's own momentum to spin her around. Before anyone could blink, Ashley was face first against the lockers, her arm twisted behind her back in a hold that had her gasping in pain. "Let go of me!" Ashley shrieked, but her voice was muffled by the metal locker. "You wanted to fight," Sarah said calmly, applying just enough pressure to make her point. "This is fighting. How do you like it?" Jessica made the mistake of rushing forward to help her friend. Sarah released Ashley and moved to meet the attack, her body flowing through movements that had been drilled into her for years. A quick jab to Jessica's solar plexus dropped her to her knees, gasping for air. Madison, seeing her two friends neutralized in seconds, backed away with her hands raised. "Please," she stammered. "We didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Sarah cut her off. "You meant every word, every laugh, every time you made me feel like garbage. You meant all of it." Ashley had recovered enough to turn around, her face red with humiliation and rage. "You crazy bitch! I'll have you expelled! You'll what?" Sarah stepped closer, and Ashley instinctively pressed back against the lockers. "You'll tell everyone how the fat girl you've been torturing for weeks just handed you your ass? You'll explain to your parents how you got beat up by someone you called a pig?" The hallway was dead silent, except for Jessica's labored breathing. Every student watched in fascination as the school's social order crumbled before their eyes. Ashley Morrison, untouchable Queen Bee, was cowering against a locker while her victim stood over her like a conquering hero. "Here's what's going to happen," Sarah continued, her voice never rising above conversational level. "You're going to leave me alone. All of you. You're going to find someone else to entertain you, because I'm done being your show. You can't just—" Ashley started. "I can do whatever I want," Sarah interrupted. "That's the funny thing about respect, Ashley. You can't demand it. You can't buy it. You can't bully people into giving it to you. You have to earn it." She turned to address the crowd that had gathered. "That goes for all of you. 6 weeks I've been here, and not one of you said a word when they were tearing me apart. You all just watched, grateful it wasn't you. Well, now you know. I don't need your protection. I never did." Ashley tried one last desperate move, launching herself at Sarah's back. It was another amateur mistake. Sarah heard her coming, spun around, and caught her with a perfect right hook that sent her sprawling across the hallway floor. Ashley lay there for a moment, stunned, blood trickling from her nose. "Stay down," Sarah advised. "I won't tell you again." Ashley looked up at her, and for the first time Sarah saw something besides cruelty in her eyes. Fear. Real, genuine fear of what she had awakened. "You're insane," Ashley whispered. "No," Sarah replied. "I'm tired. Tired of being your victim. Tired of being afraid. Tired of pretending I'm something I'm not." She looked around at the crowd of students, their phones still recording, their faces showing a mixture of shock and awe. "My name is Sarah Rodriguez. I'm 17 years old. I weigh 230 pounds, and I'm a 3-time amateur boxing champion. I've been training to fight since I was 11, and I'm good at it. Really good." She turned back to Ashley, who was slowly getting to her feet. "You picked the wrong girl to mess with, Ashley. You thought because I was fat, because I was quiet, because I was new, that I was weak. You were wrong." "This isn't over," Ashley said, but the fight had gone out of her voice. "Yes, it is," Sarah corrected. "It's been over since the moment you threw that first punch. Everything after this is just you learning to live with the consequences." Principal Martinez appeared at the end of the hallway, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" The students scattered like startled birds, but Sarah stood her ground. Ashley and her friends also remained, looking battered and humiliated. "Just a misunderstanding, sir," Sarah said calmly. "We were working it out." Principal Martinez looked between the girls, taking in Ashley's bloody nose and disheveled appearance, Jessica still clutching her stomach, and Sarah standing calm and collected in the center of it all. "Ms. Morrison, do you need to see the nurse?" Ashley looked at Sarah, then at the principal, then back at Sarah. "No, sir. I'm fine." "Good. All of you get to class. And if I hear about any more altercations, there will be consequences for everyone involved." As the principal walked away, Ashley leaned close to Sarah. "You think you've won something here?" "I think I've ended something here," Sarah replied. "The question is, are you smart enough to let it stay ended?" Ashley stared at her for a long moment, then walked away without another word. Jessica and Madison followed, casting nervous glances back at Sarah. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sideways glances. By lunch, the story had spread through the entire school, growing and changing with each telling. Sarah Rodriguez, the quiet fat girl, had taken down the most popular clique in school single-handedly. But the real change was in how people looked at her. The mocking glances were gone, replaced by something else: respect, curiosity, and in some cases, fear. Sarah sat in the cafeteria for the first time since her second day, eating her lunch while students gave her a wide berth. She wasn't invisible anymore, but she wasn't a target either. She was simply Sarah Rodriguez, and that was enough. Ashley and her friends sat at their usual table, but the dynamic had shifted. Ashley kept her head down, her movements subdued. The other popular kids sensed the change in power and began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with weakness. 2 weeks later, Ashley approached Sarah at her locker. Gone was the aggressive posture, the cruel smirk, the pack of followers. She stood alone, looking smaller somehow. "I wanted to apologize," Ashley said quietly. Sarah looked at her, taking in the genuine remorse in her eyes. "For what, exactly?" "For everything. For being cruel. For making your life hell. For—" Ashley struggled with the words. "For being everything I hate about myself." "Why?" Sarah asked. "Why did you target me?" Ashley was quiet for a long moment. "Because you were different, because you were new, because—" She took a shaky breath. "Because I was jealous." "Jealous? You didn't care what anyone thought. You were just yourself. And I've spent so many years trying to be what everyone else wanted me to be that I forgot who I actually was." Ashley's voice cracked slightly. "I took it out on you because I couldn't take it out on myself." Sarah studied her former tormentor, seeing her clearly for the first time. Beneath the designer clothes and perfect hair was a girl just as lost and afraid as she had been. "I accept your apology," Sarah said finally, "but that doesn't mean we're friends." "I know," Ashley nodded. I needed you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'm trying to be better." She walked away, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts. The girl who had made her life miserable was gone, replaced by someone who seemed almost human. It was a reminder that everyone was fighting battles that others couldn't see. The rest of senior year passed peacefully. Sarah never had to fight again, but everyone knew she could. She made friends with other students who had been on the outside, forming a group of misfits who looked out for each other. She joined the school's boxing club, becoming their star fighter and leading them to a regional championship. On graduation day, as she walked across the stage to receive her diploma, Sarah caught sight of Ashley in the crowd. Their eyes met for a moment, and Ashley gave her a small nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't friendship, but it was something. After the ceremony, Sarah's uncle Miguel found her in the parking lot. "I heard you had some trouble at school," he said with a knowing smile. "Just had to remind someone that respect is earned, not given," Sarah replied. "And did you remember what I taught you about being a fighter?" Sarah thought about it. That real strength isn't about hurting people. It's about protecting yourself and others. It's about knowing when to fight and when to walk away. "And when do you fight, Mija?" "When walking away stops being an option," she answered. "When someone needs to learn that actions have consequences." Miguel nodded approvingly. "You've learned well, but remember, the strongest person in the room is often the one who doesn't need to prove it." As Sarah drove home that evening, she thought about the girl she'd been when she first walked into Riverside High. Scared, alone, desperate to be invisible. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and wouldn't let anyone convince her otherwise. She'd learned that bullies were cowards at heart, that they picked on people they perceived as weak because they were weak themselves. She'd learned that sometimes you had to fight to find peace, that sometimes violence was the only language certain people understood. But most importantly, she'd learned that she was never as powerless as she'd believed. The strength had always been there, waiting for the right moment to emerge. All she'd needed was the courage to use it. The fat girl who'd been everyone's target was gone. In her place stood Sarah Rodriguez, boxer, fighter, and survivor. And she was exactly who she was meant to be,